Welcome to the program Asia Talk by Asian Newsmakers. I am Binny Yadav. Today we have with us Dr. Parth Shah. Dr. Shah is a founding president of Center for Civil Society. Dr. Shah is an academician, economist and renowned civil society activist. Welcome Dr. Shah in the program The Asia Talk. Political parties are openly threatening the voters that if you do not vote for us, we will not work for you. As a civil society activist, how much you think that this is a threat perception for democratic process?
I think the political situation has become more brazen, right? The politicians have no limit in terms of how they are going to go about garnering votes for themselves, right? My sense is that this threat is obviously made publicly, which has been always been there even before. So we know very good many examples. Say, for example, in West Bengal, people did not vote for CPM, did not receive services from local government. Right? So I think that partisan role of being played by political parties and politicians has been there. So I don't think it's a new phenomena per se in Indian history. But I think the degree to which it is now being publicly said out loud, right, and targeting particular groups of individuals and populations has become more brazen, right? And I think that is something that we should worry about. That how can you have a civil discourse in a society when the politicians, who are an important component of civil discourse, are using that kind of language, using this kind of explicit threats.
You rightly said that the threat perception was always there, but it was not that blatant. How can this threat perception be taken care of?
As a liberal, classical liberal, my sort of point of view would be that what we need to do is to think about how can government has such powers to be able to do favors or deny favors, right? I think one thing fundamentally to think about how much power we want to give government, right? And if you give that kind of power, it's quite likely it's going to be abused, right? The famous phrase that absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And which is the situation that we are in. We have Mai Baap Sarkar, everything we want supposed to come from the state, right? And we created a sort of expectations among the citizens. Whatever you need, somehow demand that from the state, and states will appear and give it to you, right? If that is the perception we are creating of the state, then obviously state will say, well, you do also what I want. I will appear for you and do it for you. If you don't do what I want, then I won't appear for you, right? So I think fundamentally my problem is the degree of power that we have granted to the state. The idea of Mai Baap Sarkar, unless we change that, unless we challenge that, and the citizens are sovereign, not dependent on the state's largesse, right? But the current discourse, as you can see, in terms of every sector of the economy, right? Not those who are under distress, obviously they need help, but every sector of the economy is about how much money are you giving to us, what subsidies are we going to get, including corporates and obviously all the people down the line, right? So if the expectation of Mai Baap Sarkar, then Sarkar is going to become Mai Baap and behave as Mai Baap.
There are reports that Election Commission has not used its powers judiciously and the Supreme Court has to intervene. How much do you think as a civil society activist this thing can be taken care of in future?
My personal sort of point is that the Election Commission is not able to do its role, right? Because we are undermining independent institutions, right? So it was supposed to be independent, right? It's no longer seen to be independent. Judiciary is independent. Sometimes we also doubt that. Is our judges really independent or not, right? So I think that's a more fundamental issue. To me, it's not related to one political party or one individual. I see as a fundamental current that is playing across the world, not just in India. We talked about all the right-wing populism which is growing around the world, right? We know that very well. So I think what is underlying that is the idea the state is supposed to take care of you in everything. Once we accept that idea, then state is all powerful, right? As they say, if I have power to give you anything you want, then I also have power to take away everything you got.
How can we empower the civil society?
I think that's a very important question. That how can we empower civil society? How can we build those institutions which are outside the state, right? Which can also fight with the state if the need be, Right? I think that's a very important issue that we should discuss and debate, which I don't think is getting any attention today. Right? Is one political party against the other political party, one way of saying threatening people, the other way of threatening people, right? So that's what the current situation is in terms of our politics, right? And the question that you are asking is very important question. How do we build civil society capacity, right? How do we build capacity of citizens to be able to do things on their own, right? Center for Civil Society, the name actually is chosen precisely for that reason, because we believe that citizens and civil society. I think one way to empower obviously is education. But even that we will talk about probably is not getting done well. Right? I think much more importantly from my point of view is that we need to break this whole mindset about Mai Baap Sarkar. Right? So if your first instinct when you need help is to look at the state, right, then the state is all powerful entity. You can't take that away. Right? If your first instinct is look at your family, look at your neighborhood, your community, is that's where you're going to go first to seek help, then that's the group that you're empowering, right? By looking at the state, we take away all the civil society activism, the support groups, right, aids that we have built over the centuries, and all is going towards one place. It seems nice, now we can hold state to account, right? But other side, state is getting that kind of power, which will be abused at any point in time. Right? So to make citizens powerful, my first instinct when I say, okay, this is not working, is not how can I shout at the state, is how can I go to other citizens in my neighborhood? How can we get together to solve our problem? Right? So unless we build that self-responsibility and really believe in it, right? And what we call Swabhiman and Swalamban, right? Unless we value those virtues, I don't think we are going to be dependent on somebody else, then somebody else would have that power.
So you mean to say that we should not depend on the state for the education?
Specifically, education is different. We'll talk about that separately. So it's true that education in India is already almost half in private hands, right? Almost half of the students in the country are going to private schools, right? So in some sense, we have already privatized half of the education in the country. Right. Now can you turn the wheel back? Is it worthwhile to turn the wheel back? My answer is no. Right. We have gone too far in that direction. Right. Some countries, as you know, Western countries are still largely run by the state education system, the state run schools, right? Not so much private schools. In the US, for example, only 90% of the students, all of them go to government schools, about 10% go to private schools. In India is quite the opposite by and large. Right. If you add higher education, numbers are even larger, those who go to private sector. Right. So the question then becomes, how do we then create the incentives and regulations, right, to be able to govern the private sector role in education so that it works in the benefit of the people. Right. I think that's where a lot of our research at Center for Civil Society is focused on. Right. So how do we design the public policy, right, in order to create that kind of environment, right? We are also trying to build a whole public policy school, right, where we hope we can train more people who could then play this kind of a role in the larger policy debate, right? We do not have as many policy professionals in the country, even though much of the government work is policy related, right? And so we are hoping that Indian School of Public Policy that we are building would create people who work not only in Delhi. There are of course many who want to work in Delhi, but we need more and more people in Raipur and Jodhpur, right, where nobody else is going.
How do we fix the accountability in education sector?
I think one important thing we could do, which is already done in the amendment to the Constitution, the 73rd and the 74th Amendment, right, in which we are supposed to pass on the functions, finances and functionaries to the third tier of government, right? Education obviously is part of that, right? While currently education is run by the state governments and by the central government, there is hardly any role for the local government in the education system. Much of the world, right, education is done by local governments, not by state and central governments, right? I think first thing they should do is to just decentralize, devolve the powers and finances to the third tier of government, and therefore you will then get more accountability, right? You will get more focus on what the people need in that area, as opposed to one standardized system for the whole state, right? We know that if you have one system for state of Orissa, it's just not going to be suitable for most of the people. And the languages are different, even though official is a Odia, but that's no language half of the people speak, right? So you need to customize it, you need to sort of find ways of localizing it, right? And unless we decentralize education, I don't really see that we are going to be able to do much improvement in the quality that we deliver.
So this was Dr. Shah speaking to Asian newsmakers candidly about the policies and how we can convert these policies into practice. We keep watching Asian newsmakers, subscribing us, and wait for another very interesting interviews in the program Asia Talk.